In this village lived a woman named Adana. Now, when I say Adana, I want you to understand the kind of woman I mean. Not beautiful in the way that strangers notice first. Beautiful in the way that people who know her can't quite explain. The kind of beautiful that comes from a woman who has decided, somewhere deep in her chest, that she will hold everything together, even if it kills her. Her husband had gone the way husbands sometimes go in those kinds of stories. Not dramatically, not with thunder. Just one morning he was there, the next morning he was not, and the third morning everyone accepted it and moved on, the way people do when life refuses to give proper explanations. She was left with one child. One. A boy she named Chukwemeka. God has done great things. 7 years old, bright eyes, the kind of child who made her mother feel every single day that perhaps the world had not completely forgotten about her. He was her one thing. Are you listening? Because this matters. He was her one thing. It started with a fever. Now, fevers in that village were not dramatic events. Children got fevers. Mothers tied wet cloth to foreheads. The herbalist came with something dark in a gourd. The child slept. The child rose. Life continued. But this fever had patience. It came on a Tuesday. They treated it. It retreated, the way a stubborn man retreats, not in defeat, but in strategy. It came back on Thursday, stronger. They treated it again. It retreated again. By the following week, it had moved into the child's body the way an unwanted in-law moves into a house, quietly at first, then permanently. Emeka stopped eating. Then he stopped laughing. Then he stopped asking his questions. Adana tried everything that women in that village knew how to try. She went to the herbalist 3 times. She went to the native doctor. She walked 6 kilometers to the church at the edge of the next village and stayed there on her knees until the pastor had to come and lift her up because her legs had gone numb. She boiled leaves. She mixed roots. She sang songs over him in the night that she didn't even know she remembered, songs her own mother had sung to her, songs that carry the weight of every generation that ever sat beside a sick child and refused to accept the darkness. But Emeka kept getting thinner, and the village kept watching. That is the thing about villages that city people sometimes forget. Villages watch, not with cruelty, most of them not with cruelty, but with the kind of helpless, heavy-eyed watching that people do when they know the ending of a story before it has finished being told. Old women would come to Adana's door with food she didn't ask for. That is how she knew they had already decided what was happening. When people bring you food you didn't ask for, they are not feeding your stomach. They are preparing your grief. Adana refused the food. If she accepted it, she would be accepting what the food meant. It was on a Sunday morning, and this detail is important because the village would later argue about it, the way villages argue about things they don't understand. It was on a Sunday morning that Adana did the thing. Emeka had been lying on his mat for 3 days without opening his eyes. His breathing had become a conversation between 2 people who were arguing about whether to continue. In, out, and sometimes silence in between that lasted just long enough to make your own heart stop. The women of the compound were there. They had brought their presents the way you bring presents when you have nothing else to bring. And then Adana stood up. Nobody thought anything of it. They thought she was going to get water, or pray, or perhaps finally break down the way they had been waiting for her to break down. That release they secretly needed her to have so they could have their own. But Adana did not get water. Adana went to the back of the hut where the farm tools were kept, and she came back with a length of rope, the kind used for tethering goats when you don't want them to wander. The women looked at her. She looked at them. Nobody said anything because there are moments in life when words feel like they belong to a different language entirely. Adana knelt beside her son and with the hands of a woman who had milked cows and woven baskets and braided her daughter-in-law's hair at a wedding, hands that had done 100 ordinary things with complete competence, she tied one end of the rope around her son's thin ankle. Then she tied the other end to the wooden post at the center of the hut, the post that held up everything. One of the older women, a woman named Mama Uchenna, who had buried 2 of her own children and therefore had earned the right to speak on such matters, Mama Uchenna said quietly, "Adana, what are you doing?" And Adana said, without looking up, without any trembling in her voice, which was somehow the most frightening part of all, "I am tying him to the ground. He will not go." Mama Uchenna tried. She tried the way old women try, with patience first, then with firmness, then with that particular sorrow that settles in old eyes like sediment in still water. "You cannot tie life. My daughter, what God holds, no rope can hold better." Adana said nothing. "The child is suffering." Adana said nothing. "This is not love. This is fear wearing love's face." This is not love. This is fear wearing love's face. Now, if I stop here, and I am going to stop here for a moment because this is the kind of sentence that deserves its own silence. If I stop here, I want to ask you something. How many of us have done this same thing? Not with a physical rope, not with a child, but think carefully. How many things have you tied to that center post in your life because you could not bear to let them go? A relationship that was already leaving? A version of yourself that no longer served you, but you kept watering it anyway because releasing it felt like dying? A dream that had finished its season, but you kept watering it anyway because releasing it felt like dying? A person who had already, in every way that mattered, said goodbye, and you kept reaching, kept calling, kept creating reasons for one more conversation, one more chance, one more morning. We are all, at some point, Adana. We are all in that hut. We are all holding that rope. The village elders came. Then the pastor came. Then Adana's own mother came, an old woman who walked with a stick and who normally had an opinion about everything. But when she walked into that hut and saw her daughter kneeling beside that rope, the old woman sat down on the floor in the corner and said nothing, because she understood something the others did not. She understood that Adana was not crazy. Adana was just a mother. And there is no explaining a mother to people who are not currently inside that specific love. Through the night, they kept a vigil around her, the women and the elders and the pastor praying in low voices, while Adana sat beside Emeka, one hand on his chest to feel the rise and fall of it, one eye on that rope, watching it, as if she truly believed, that the rope was the thing standing between her son and whatever waited on the other side of this world. She sang to him in the night, the old songs. She told him stories, not the cheerful ones, the real ones, the ones that start in darkness and end in morning. She told him about his father, things she had never told anyone, things she had kept inside like a savings she wasn't sure she would ever need. She told him, "You are not allowed to go. Do you hear me? You are not allowed. I did not grow you in my body for 9 months and push you out screaming into this world for you to take one look at it and decide to leave. You owe me, Emeka. You owe me more years. You owe me watching you become a man. You owe me seeing you fall in love and make foolish mistakes and coming running back home when she breaks your heart. You owe me grandchildren. You owe me an old age. Don't you dare." But Emeka lay still. The rope lay across the earth floor between them like a question no one had answered. Just before the sun rose, something shifted in the hut. Not something you could see, not something you could point to, but every person in that hut felt it. The way the atmosphere in a room changes when a decision has been made that cannot be unmade. Mama Uchenna felt it and began to weep silently. The pastor felt it and closed his Bible. Adana's own mother in the corner felt it and bowed her head because she understood something the others did not. Only Adana didn't feel it. Or perhaps she felt it most clearly of all and was refusing to accept what she felt. She pressed her hand harder on her son's chest. And then, in a voice so thin and small it barely qualified as a sound, Emeka opened his eyes. He looked at his mother. He looked at the rope on his ankle. He looked at the post it was tied to. And with the last of whatever strength was in him, he turned his face to hers and said so quietly that Adanna had to lean down close to hear it, had to put her ear almost to his lips, "Mama, you can untie me now."